Welcome to Comic and Screen. My name is Sam Otten, and with me is Jason Book. And in this video, we're going to do some anticipation of the Wonder Woman film that's coming out in June. We are going to be asking the question, what sorts of stories, what sorts of previous incarnations of Wonder Woman might this film be drawing on? So I want to start with, at the top, with Patty Jenkins, who's been directing and the creative, leader of this movie. And she has talked about a few things that have inspired her. One is definitely the Wonder Woman TV show in the 70s. She talked about when she was younger how that had a really big impact on her. Another thing from the same era in the 70s, Patty Jenkins has consistently talked about Superman the Movie by Richard Donner. And then Patty Jenkins said that the main mantra they've had about Wonder Woman and about kind of what sort of movie this is they've said it's Superman the Movie meets Casablanca. So first of all, just thinking about some of the TV and past movie superhero fare, what do you think that might feed into for the Wonder Woman film?
Well, it sounds maybe, okay, a lot of directors cite Superman 1 and maybe 2 if you consider it one movie as being like one of the best superhero movies ever made. So they want to have that feel where people thought, who's going to watch a movie about Superman? And then everyone was blown away. So if they're taking that page out of it, I love that, because maybe she's trying to say, we're taking Wonder Woman and making it a character that people are going to really care about from the story, from the start, beginning, finish, and be surprised that's not what they expect. So I like that aspect. The Casablanca thing, to me, if they're focusing on the romance between her and Steve Trevor, that's cool for that aspect. But if they're trying to make it more like, we want things that really call back to that this is in a different era, to me that could hurt the film, because I liked when I first heard they were doing a movie set in a different time versus World War II or whichever we've seen before. But I don't want that to overtake the aspect of Wonder Woman being a timeless character as well.
Right. Yeah, I think, hopefully it ends up being that she is a timeless character because she is there in that era and a different era and the modern era, and so that makes her timeless.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. You don't want to go too far and make it just seem old instead of, seeming kind of a current feel to the movie now. But based on the trailers, I think they're pulling it off. But yeah, I think from the Casablanca, I think that is more of a little bit of the setting, a little bit of the kind of dusty color tones and stuff, and then having a romance kind of in the time of war. Yeah. That's probably what they're going for on that one.
Yeah, for sure.
And Patty Jenkins has said, too, that she is very proud of the love story that they've told and how it's, it's not a drippy kind of, romance on the top of things, but that underneath the story, she said there really is a reason for these two to be drawn together, and we see them developing that relationship over the course of the movie, and she said that she's really proud of how it turned out. So I'm getting a lot of faith in the way that she's talking about the movie, and I'm not, I don't beat down the door for romance, but I think sometimes a love story can really enhance the overall story that's happening in a movie. So I'm open to it, especially if the filmmakers feel like they've pulled it off.
Yeah, as long as they do it, like a Superman, Lois Lane type movie romance, and not like a Anakin Skywalker and Padme, version where everyone was like, "Oh God," like you're rolling your eyes at the screen, right? So it sounds like they've got the right take on it, and they've probably learned from other movies that have made mistakes in that way.
Yeah, and I think with the 70s TV show, I think they're probably going to give it some nods and some homages, but I think it's going to be a very different style to this one. But I think they're going to just say, we loved that 70s show, even though we're doing something a little bit different now.
Yeah, like the things they could take for me that are really amazing still about that show is that, Wonder Woman, once you saw her in the cheesy outfit and between her and being Diana, it was believable. The casting of Linda Carter was huge, and if the casting of Gal Gadot can pull off the same thing, then they've done their job for sure.
Yeah. So Patty Jenkins was involved in the story as well. Zack Snyder kind of pitched the original idea, but Patty Jenkins has been involved in getting it written. But the official writers are Alan Heinberg and Jeff Johns, who both have some connections to not only TV and also to comics. Jeff Johns obviously huge in the comics. So that leads me to think, the New 52 run of Wonder Woman, where Jeff Johns was already, kind of a head guy at DC Comics at that time. That could be something too, and it seems like we're getting a kind of demigod, Zeus's daughter sort of thing for Wonder Woman, for Diana, so that could be coming from Brian Azzarello's run in the New 52.
Yeah, there's a lot of things they can pull from different books, the George Perez stuff back in the 80s, the ones you just mentioned, and really that Azzarello run was really set the bar high, because it was quite well done. So I think that if they do, as I said with the taking bits from the TV show, you take the bits and pieces you like from the various runs and try and make something that's kind of a new take on Wonder Woman, but kind of paying homage, as we've said on many occasions, to the previous stuff. I definitely feel there's a Zack Snyder influence here because he's already put his hand on the character, and I definitely have a 300 feel in some of these fight scenes, and that's not a bad thing at all. But I hope with those splashes of color and the setting that we have our own unique take on Wonder Woman. I think when we first see her on screen doing some of these things, if the trailers like the movie, we're going to be pretty blown away, I hope.
Yeah. I agree with you about the taking things that the filmmakers like or that they think will work in the story that they want to tell. And the sense that I've gotten overall is that this is not an adaptation of a particular story.
Yeah.
It's really going to be its own story. They've moved the setting to World War I, which we talked about before. I think is really a brilliant way to do it. And I think they're just going to pick individual elements. So like from Brian Azzarello, I think they're going to take the demigod angle instead of the, formed from clay.
Yeah.
They'll take that from Brian Azzarello, but then probably not much else, because Brian Azzarello really was diving into like the gods and the, backstabbing between the gods and the gods' children and stuff. And this one's going to have the, Themyscira basis, but I think it's going to be much more about the Amazons. I don't think we're going to get into all kinds of the drama between the gods.
Yeah, totally. Because I could see that being a little too convoluted. But if it is successful enough, maybe they'd lay some of the seeds for that kind of stuff in the background. That would be smart as a trilogy kind of thing. As we've said before, too, they're coming at it from a different way, too, because a lot of times these movies, when you're kind of rebooting a character and showing it from the first 8 days of the character, haven't been seen on screen before. She's already been seen in Batman versus Superman. So I wonder if that is something that helps or hinders how we go into this, because certain people may have a predisposition to the character, what they've already seen in Batman versus Superman. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of excitement about seeing her in BVS,
Right.
and she didn't get a ton of screen time, so there wasn't a lot for people to get too entrenched in one way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think the main Zack Snyder influence will be that she has to finish the movie by withdrawing from mankind.
Right.
And that's probably why Zack Snyder has credit on story, because he probably came in and said, this is what I had in mind for why she would have withdrawn from humanity. But then after that, other people, Jeff Johns and Heinberg and stuff, have crafted the full story of that. But I think if people from BVS bring with them the question, what happened that would make her withdraw for 100 years? Like something really bad, or she must have lost faith in the goodness or the potential of mankind, specifically being led by men. That I think that's okay to bring that in from BVS. I think that's actually going to be a good question to just have and then watch the movie and have it answered by the end.
Yeah, and as I've said before too, when you're going to do a movie with someone, the out of time factor, there's nothing wrong with taking stuff from Captain America in a way and maybe doing your own take on that, because that's got to be something they address in here, that she is someone from a different time, and there's a lot of story potential there. So I really hope we see some of that.
And we also could have some Thor connections in terms of fish out of water, or somebody from a different society who is now in our earthly society.
Of course.
Because Patty Jenkins was involved in Thor 2
Exactly.
pretty deeply until so she might take some of those elements and for the fish out of water part of the movie.
Yeah, and definitely we haven't talked about it yet, but it's a huge thing, is the feminist aspect of this movie. And Wonder Woman was always that role model for a lot of people from the TV show era to the comics and the cartoons. So I really hope they pull that off well, because I think a lot of female comic fans and movie fans just in general have been waiting for something like this.
Yeah. Now, to go back to something I said earlier about the Greek, the gods drama, I do, of course, recognize Ares is the villain of the movie, so that gives us a Greek connection, but I think that it's not going to be into all of the Greek gods and all of their backstabbing and relationships with each other, but I like having Ares. Because Ares does gives us a connection back to Themyscira and the Amazons of ancient time and stuff, and then brings that connection into man's world. But I think it's good to make it mostly about man's world, and just Ares is there, so then Wonder Woman's there to kind of balance each other out and see what happens, rather than going full 100% into the gods pantheon kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, to me, if they're smart, you'd play the character like he's a big bad, but maybe pulling strings in the background or something, and wait for a bigger reveal either later in the movie or later in another Wonder Woman movie. If I was doing it, that could work quite well, I think.
Yeah. And then this leads me to something else that people might watch in anticipation of this movie is you might watch the Wonder Woman animated film. That one has Ares as the main villain, but that one I think goes in a very different direction. It has Ares, and then it has the god stuff, and it has the backstabbing. This one I think it is going to be more of a stealthy Ares, where Ares is influencing people, like you just said, rather than an Ares who's like, oh, I'm Ares, I'm here, and I'm killing people, and I'm setting up this arrangement to cheat against this person or whatever. So that I like that animated movie for what it is, but I think that the way that they're going with this live action movie is going to be even better.
Yeah, I mean, they could definitely take parts from that because it was one of the better DC animated movies to feature Wonder Woman, definitely, and I enjoyed that take on it very much.
Yeah, and it does have the Steve Trevor arriving, and then it does have the love story kind of happening through it, and then it's got Ares there, so there's definitely some of the same elements, but I think that the way they're executing them is going to be very different.
Yeah, and they even had the origin quite properly in there, too, so I'm hoping the movie, we're going to get all that stuff.
Yeah. Now, the last thing we wanted to mention was Alan Heinberg, who's one of the co-writers on the movie, and he has been involved in Wonder Woman before. He was involved in the pilot for the CW, I think, but it never went anywhere.
Right.
But he also, Jason was reminding me, he wrote some Wonder Woman comics. I think it was the volume Who is Wonder Woman?
I believe
which was back in 2007, 2008, which was a follow-up to Infinite Crisis.
Yeah.
So he got his hands, Heinberg did, on a Wonder Woman story and has done that before. I haven't read that story, but I looked at the synopsis of it real quickly, and it seems very, very different. Donna Troy is actually like taking up the mantle of Wonder Woman, and Diana has withdrawn. And then there's all kinds of commotion and comic book type stuff that happens. But one thing that might be similar is the idea of a withdrawn Diana who, something is pulling her back into action. That might come into play like at the end of the live action movie when Diana withdraws, which I'm assuming happens at the end of this movie coming up.
Yeah, that could work well. And also I remember the artwork was quite good in the run that he had, and they could take things from that, use it in the movie. But I remember in some interviews, he was talking about how big of a fan he was of the character his whole life. So that's always something good when someone's doing an adaptation as well.
Yeah, that's great. I think overall it seems like the creators are very passionate about this project and feel very good about what they've achieved, and the trailers have looked great. So I'm just really looking forward to it. I can't believe it's just a little bit more than a month away, so it's going to be here fast.
Yeah, we'll definitely be talking about that when it comes out, and definitely looking forward to it.